Well, you're very welcome back. In this video, I'm going to talk about the shot process. Most people believe that the shot process, it's simply a sequence of steps, if you will. Lift the rifle, aim and pull the trigger, and that's a shot process. But I'd say that following that type of a mindset, it doesn't create consistent performance. Two shooters, for example, could follow those exact same steps with two totally different outcomes, and actually do, if you think about it. I would say it's not just what you do, I'd say it's how you do it, and can you execute it under pressure? There's another one. Two people can carry out the same steps. Golf would be an example. I would say at the top level, every golfer has every shot in the bag. They've experience of how to take every shot from every lie. And what I believe it comes down to in our sport, in shooting, as well as sports like golf, it's what happens when the pressure comes on. And what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to break down a little bit the shot process, what it is, how it works, and why it's the foundation of a repeatable process and a repeatable performance. So what people think the shot process is, they think it's simple, you know. I mean, everyone can do it. It's pick up the rifle, it's point it at the target, look down the sight, line everything up, whatever that means, and then pull the trigger. They believe it's just a sequence. I've spoken to some younger shooting athletes, actually, and you'll say, do you have a shot process? And they'll say, oh yeah. And yet if you sit back and watch them, maybe 2 shots out of 10, they'll repeat the same steps visually from an outside. You don't know what they're thinking internally, but from the outside, they don't seem to have anything other than, I need to get more lead in there, pull the trigger. They'll even stand back, not just young athletes, I'm talking about more mature ones as well, and they'll sit and take a break because it seems to be something that people do, but actually there's no real reason why they're doing it other than it's a thing to do. They assume that copying the guy beside them or the girl beside them, that's going to give, because that's what that person is doing, but they don't actually think what's going on in that person's mind. From the outside, all of this looks simple. I mean, even you talk to people, sure, and I've spoken to people, it's only 10 metres, it is, and the bullseye that we have to be hitting, it's a 0.5 millimetre at 10 metres. Get your ballpoint pen out, get your buddy to stand 10 metres away from you, and then you go, can you see that? And then tell them that within that ballpoint tip, there are 10 concentric circles. And in our sport, at the Paralympic side of things, we need to be hitting 10.5 and above in every shot, or you're going home. Shot process looks simple. It's not simple, but it can definitely be simplified, shall we say. People see it as a checklist to be ticked off, I think. And I think that's a bit of a misunderstanding. Lift, aim, shoot, focus on the visible actions. So you'll see sighting, everyone looks down the barrel, pulls the trigger, and yet 2 people looking down a barrel, pulling the trigger can get 2 totally, and I mean totally different results. They assume that if they copy the person doing what they've seen them doing, which to the outside, by the way, mostly in our sport anyway, you've got people sitting in wheelchairs. Very difficult to see they're doing anything other than looking down a barrel. Loaders have loaded for them, they're literally sitting there, but there's a lot of physical work going on to not visibly do anything externally, I would say. But yeah, I think a lot of people, even from the able-bodied side, you'd look at them and people will copy. And I've seen people looking up during training sessions where there may be 5 or 6 athletes, and they'll copy that other person because they're doing something. It could be, for example, someone who might be the best in a group. Everyone's going to copy them because that's what it takes to do what that person does, and yet they don't get the results that person does. So a shot process for me, it's a structured system. It's a very comfortable system, and when I'm within that system, I'm not thinking about a hell of a lot of things other than execution of each step within the system. Controls the variables within the shot. Manages the environment, doesn't eliminate it. If I'm busy doing something. If you think about it, by the way, your brain can only do one thing at a time. You get to decide what it thinks about. If you're going to let it wander, if you're going to let it get excited, things like that, you've given it that opportunity. I believe a short process is an opportunity to control it. Slow it down, slow down the breathing, slow down the actions. And again, you're executing every shot with the same intensity of focus as you will in a competition. And vice versa, in a competition, you're executing every shot with the same level of intensity that you did in your training. I would say same situation, different day. Obviously, I'm not using the other word that could fit in there. But what it does is it creates repetition. It creates consistency. It creates reliability if you execute the steps within a shot process. They're not just to be rushed through. They're not to be deliberated over either. They're to be executed in sequence as close to perfectly as possible. It's designed to work under pressure. That's the thing. A shot process is a very reliable place to be in execution under pressure. What I would say is the steps that, from a high level, if you look at them, we're talking about you set your position up, you build your connection to the rifle, control your breathing. Breathing's a massive part of this sport. Without breathing, the muscles tighten up. Without enough air in your lungs to sight, first of all, you have to be able to hold your breath. Secondly, you have to be able to hold it at the right length just to get your perfect shot off. So yeah, breathing would be a very, very big part of this sport. Not in the high intensity, you have to be able to run for 5 hours type marathon stuff. Well, 5 hours in a wheelchair. Sight picture, that's an aspect of it as well. You need to be able to get the rings all lined up, your target with your foresight and your rear sight. The execution and what people emphasise then is the follow through. That's a big part of it. That's a process. If you execute that process reliably, perfectly, you can expect reliable results. The outcome is reliable. There will be variances, but there won't be deviations in the maximum, which you don't go from a 6 to a 10 if you execute your process correctly. You might go from a 10 to a 9 point something, but you shouldn't be going out into the 5s and 6s from a 10 if you execute the process correctly. So that for me is what the process is about. Why does it work under pressure? Well, it brings about clarity and focus. Pressure reduces that clarity, but the more you focus on your shot process, the less pressure you can actually feel, in my opinion. Again, back to if your brain is working on one thing and one thing only, it doesn't have room for anything else coming in there. There's safety within familiarity. You know, if you even went in, for example, you go into a new room with new people, there's a little bit of anxiety around it. If that place, for example, you're training at your own home range, you're competing at your own home range, there's not the same level of shock when you go to that competition at home. You go abroad, you're in a new environment. Same thing with your shot process. If your shot process is something you've trained regularly, then you can reliably accept that when you get to a competition and you execute that, you're not under as much anxiety and as much stress. There will be some, but it doesn't have to be because of the familiarity. Consistent processes, they reduce the variability. Again, there'll be small changes, but not maximum changes, not really stuff that's way out. You could assume that you've got a bigger problem if you're out in the 6 ring, considering you're normally at 10 or even high 9s. It gives you an element of control when the conditions are not perfect. It stops you running off. It stops your head running away with you with all the worries and all the fears, because it's that thing of a comfort. It's like a blankie even. You're very comfortable executing your process. And then the stresses and pressures and things that go slightly wrong, they don't affect you the same way. It becomes more stable, the execution, over time. Again, like driving. In the early stages, you were looking down to find the gears. As time goes on, you're more tuned into other aspects. You'd be totally tuned out of driving, but you can hear the music in the radio now instead of having to focus so much on what's going on with the car. Same thing with the shooting. Your shot process, train regularly with it, execute it regularly. Then when you go to a competition, you can re-execute that in a performance environment and expect a reliable outcome. What I'd say is problems I've seen with people rushing the process, too eager, timing, rhythm, they're not there. I've seen people who I've wondered what exactly they are at, because I'm trying to figure out what would someone be doing in a shot process. And one shot takes 20 seconds, the next takes 40 seconds. They're in a 60 shot, which is broken down normally 6 series of 10, and they're on the 3rd series while someone else is on their 1st series or halfway through their 2nd. They don't build a consistency. They're not looking to, they'll look in training, they want to get through their hour or their 2 hours so they can say it's done, but then they seem disappointed when they get to a competition. Everything changes from shot to shot. You've got shots going, I'll call it north, south, east and west. For example, you get someone who, rather than flyers, you're wondering what exactly is going on, because they're able to hit everything on the target except the black ring. They're north, they're south, they're east, they're west. That has to come down to variability brought in by shot process, I would think. Because they haven't trained with a process, under pressure, crumbles, things fall apart. They'll know themselves, it's an odd thing, they may not admit it for whatever reason, but they'll know themselves that their shot process wasn't, they'll know something went wrong. I won't even say they'll know their shot process, because for some reason you ask someone to have a shot process, everyone's got one, and yet they don't execute it the same way, so I'd have to wonder. For me, shot process is foundation. If you don't have one, you need to get one. When you have one, you need to train with it regularly and stay within its boundaries in assessment, and even within the boundaries for setting up your training plan. It has to be repeatable. But if you have a consistent, we'll say 6 steps or 5 steps, it's always going to be repeatable if those 5 steps are being repeated. And if you're doing something different in there, it's not a shot process. Execution matters more than the steps. You need to be executing it consistently and repeatably, and that way when you go from training to your competitions, same abilities apply. You're going to be executing your shot process, the same one you've trained with, the same one you've got results with, the same one you're comfortable with, and now you're brought to a competition environment, and it's a lot easier to execute it there. And I would say too that consistency is going to create the results. It definitely creates an opportunity to improve. Whatever the results are, when you're consistent, you can improve a lot easier than when they're inconsistent. So that's how I approach training. There's nothing random about it. There's nothing emotional about it. And people have asked me what motivates me. I don't allow motivation to come into training. I bring discipline to training. Again, motivation, anything could knock you out if it's motivation that's keeping you going. Motivation after a competition, I need to get back into the range and train. You do for a day or two. But if you're not disciplined after a day or two, you've got another thing that's more emotional, that's motivating you to do something else. And now your discipline has gone along with your training, and your results will stay wherever they're going to be. I'd say training should be structured. I'd say training should be consistent. And it definitely, for me, has to be deliberate. So yeah, I'm looking forward to you coming back again, and we'll deep dive further into training sessions. Thank you.